Hi students, today the topic is respiratory acidosis in acid-base balance. Actually, acidosis means decreased pH, you all know. Respiratory component is carbonic acid H2CO3. So, decreased pH and increased bicarbonate, increased carbonic acid, these two are the salient features for respiratory acidosis. Okay, main problem is carbonic acid. Either increase or decrease. In respiratory acidosis it will be increased because hypoventilation that leads to retention of carbon dioxide. Hypoventilation that will retain the carbon dioxide, that is the reason for the increased amount of carbonic acid. Okay, followed by, this is another important point, bicarbonate is also elevated. Okay, in respiratory acidosis we have two types of respiratory acidosis, acute and chronic. In acute, pH is moderately decreased, PCO2 is moderately increased. This is very important MCQ point. Whereas bicarbonate is either normal or increased in acute respiratory acidosis. Whereas coming to chronic respiratory acidosis, pH is mildly decreased, whereas PCO2 is mildly elevated, whereas bicarbonate is moderately or highly elevated. These two differentiating features are very important MCQ. Causes for acute respiratory acidosis: asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia like diseases, drugs like morphine, narcotic drug which depresses respiratory center that leads to respiratory acidosis, respiratory muscle paralysis produced by poliomyelitis and multiple sclerosis. Sometimes CNS injury and brain tumors also will produce acute respiratory acidosis. Coming to chronic respiratory acidosis, only one cause, that is COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. In this respiratory acidosis, what are all the clinical manifestations? We all know hypercapnia, tachycardia, tremors because of the hypoventilation, and respiratory rate is decreased, that leads to hypotension and coma. Right? These are all the clinical manifestations for respiratory acidosis. And coming to the compensation, right? For any acid-base balance disorder, the final point will be compensation. Compensation means either by lungs or kidney. Here the problem is lungs because the disease is respiratory acidosis, so the kidneys will come for the rescue. Kidneys conserve all the available bicarbonates and excrete the hydrogen ions in the form of H2PO4 and NH4.